teaching and learning for the planet is not a choice, it's a collective responsibility. So in order to bring about those sorts of changes, to focus to fight for climate change and support the just transition to a more sustainable world, there will need to be a transformation in education. And that's what we're going to talk about in this final session today. The needs for teachers and unions to work with governments to include quality climate education for education itself in the classroom, integrated into their systems in every country. That should be part of countries' climate promises and commitments on a credible timescale. So the United Nations is organising COP26 Climate Change Conference, which begins at the start of November. Countries will come together and review their commitments to combat climate change. And Scotland is the host country. So we're joined in this next panel discussion by Larry Flanagan, the General Secretary of the Educational Institute of Scotland, and Minister John Swinney, the Deputy First Minister and Cabinet Secretary for Education and Skills in Scotland. And they'll share with us their thoughts on why this conference, COP26, is important and what it means for education unions and for quality climate education. Welcome to both of you, Larry and John. And maybe let me start by asking you both, what does COP26, why does it matter to the education sector? John.
Thanks very much, Andrew, and it's a great pleasure to take part in this conversation through Education International. COP26 matters for our education system because fundamentally we have to ensure that young people are equipped to meet the challenges of the ever-changing world in which we are living. And climate change is one of those fundamental challenges, the most fundamental challenge that we all face in the forthcoming period. So we have to make sure that young people are equipped with an understanding of the issues, and from that they can form their commitments and influence the commitments of society to tackle this very significant issue. And obviously we have a unique relationship with the COP26 because it will take place in the city of Glasgow in Scotland, rescheduled because of COVID. But we hope it's going to be able to take place on a face-to-face basis and provide a landmark agreement that can tackle climate change.
Thanks, John. And we'll come back on those points. But Larry, what's your perspective? So why does COP26 matter for education?
Well, I would echo John's points, and essentially for us here in Scotland, COP26 is a real opportunity to consolidate and reinvigorate the work which has already been undertaken, because education for sustainability has been a key part of our curriculum here in Scotland for over a decade now, the curriculum for excellence. But having an event like COP26, I think, does allow us to use it as a catalyst for re-energising that agenda. I think everyone understands that education is the key to the future. And tackling climate change is about the future. So particularly in our schools, with the enthusiasm of young people in relation to the need to tackle climate change, then this is a real opportunity for us here in Scotland, but also I think globally. COP26 allows us to reset and reinvigorate the campaign to tackle climate change as effectively as possible, and we're certainly looking forward to it. I come from Glasgow, so it's my home city, and we're looking forward to the opportunity to host the world around this very important topic.
So John, as a minister, what's your commitment then to make education visible at COP26? What are you going to do?
I think, as Larry mentioned, the whole issue of considering questions around sustainability have been at the heart of Scotland's curriculum. We made a conscious decision over a decade ago to move our curriculum to ensure that it equipped young people with the skills, the knowledge and the attributes and the capacities that would enable them to deal with the world as they find it. And of course, climate change is a central part in that challenge. So the presence of COP26 within Scotland brings that curriculum to life for young people. And we've taken forward for some time a learning for sustainability strategy, and that provides opportunities for young people to learn and to understand about questions of sustainability. So that's a a thread that runs through our curriculum, and we will be encouraging and motivating a focus within our schools on the issues that emerge that are part of the preparation for COP26 and what emerges from COP26. Now, obviously, that fits in very closely with the policy agenda of the government on tackling climate change in its widest sense. And again, going back over a decade, the Scottish Parliament enacted by law some of the most demanding targets for tackling climate change. They are essentially the most demanding of any jurisdiction in the world. And we are having to work hard to adapt and change our systems to enable us to comply with those targets. So I think what COP26 provides us with an opportunity to do is to share the progress that we have made in Scotland, but then also to be challenged about what more needs to be done, because all of us need to change practices and approaches to enable us to tackle this very significant issue.
So, John, COP26 is obviously a symbolic event to crystallise a lot of these discussions, but will you carve out, for example, during the event or in some parallel sessions, the opportunities for teachers and the education community to very actively engage with the debates and discussions?
Yes, and we'll want to do that. We have, as a government, taken an approach to maximise the widest possible engagement with the issues around COP26. So we're creating opportunities. Obviously, still a little bit uncertain because of the implications of COVID as to what will be the physical format of those arrangements, but we are structuring a whole engagement programme so that different sectors of our society can be involved in those discussions. We want to make sure that educators and also young people are very much at the heart of that discussion, and that they have the opportunity to influence our thinking as we prepare for COP26, but also to interact with colleagues from around the globe who will be coming to Glasgow for what will be an absolutely central event in tackling climate change.
And Larry, both you and John have mentioned that point about how the Scottish curriculum has already been integrating issues of sustainability and climate change for some time. That said, do you still see some scope for increasing that? And what are the tensions, kind of balancing it with existing curricula and teacher priorities? Larry?
I think that there's a huge challenge around fitting everything into the curriculum, and it's a constant dialogue that we're having. But I think the learning for sustainability is a cross-curricular feature, and it's something that we want to embed into the daily life of our schools. There's a government agency, Education Scotland, which oversees curriculum. And as John indicated here, we're in dialogue with them so that across the COP summit, we have something taking place in every school in the country, where staff and pupils are engaged in addressing and considering the main themes of the COP summit. So there's no single agency here which has possession of this precious agenda. And one of the things that we try to do in Scotland is to work collaboratively, wherever possible, on agreed aims. And certainly I think in terms of tackling climate change, then we're in a strong place to make sure that our education system is preparing young people for a future in which this particular agenda is tackled effectively. So, across a whole range of areas, there's a lot of work ongoing, all of which creates a synergy around a better future for our children and young people.
John, anything to add on building that extra headroom to integrate still further and advance curriculum integration around sustainability and climate change beyond what Scotland's done already?
Obviously, we're constantly revisiting as a government in relation to our wider policy agenda the commitments that we are making on climate change, and as each piece of research takes its course, the challenge becomes ever more significant and serious for all of us. So we're constantly revisiting that agenda. And we're in the midst of an election campaign just now, just shortly before Parliament rose for the election. We submitted our updated climate plans to Parliament, and a significant part of them requires changes in public behaviour and public approaches, particularly around transport, around how we generate our energy, how we utilise our resources. And these will be decisions and issues influenced for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And we therefore need to make sure that our education system is equipping young people with the outlook and the perspectives to enable them to tackle these issues effectively and to be essentially willing partners and collaborators in how this is taken forward. Now, one of our core approaches within the Scottish education system is a model of collaboration between the teaching trade unions, members of staff, the government, our local authority partners, our specialist agencies, to make sure that we are all influential in forming the agenda. And I think the conversations that have taken place involving all partners, particularly our professional association colleagues, have been helpful in shaping how we can make the biggest impact of COP26 on our education system, and therefore see that as an investment in many of these challenges and meeting these challenges in the years to come.
And what do you see as the potential for greater cooperation between the government and the education unions around climate change?
I think the opportunities are essentially about making sure that our teachers are professionally equipped to lead this challenge and to lead it at all levels within our education system. And that's where we work most closely with the professional associations, because they are great allies, as well as being teaching trade unions. They are professional associations. They are allies in the further enhancement of the professional capability of teachers. And one of my central priorities as Education Secretary has been to make sure that the teaching profession is supported, that we invest in the profession. We've expanded the profession. There are commitments to further expand the profession in the years to come, and to deepen the professional learning opportunities that are central to realise many of these aspects of the agenda. So working with the professional associations on professional learning is a central part of what I want to take forward.
And Larry, building on that theme, what would you say in terms of the social dialogue and the engagement between government and the unions around climate change? What more can we see, and how's progress been to date?
Yeah, I mean, so we do have a good track record of social dialogue in Scotland, and I think it's important to underline that doesn't mean that we are in agreement at all times. There is challenge within that, and that's the best way to have social dialogue, because if you're just sitting in a room having a conversation and ticking a box and walking away, that does little. But we are actively engaged as the professional voice of teachers in shaping the agenda, and education for sustainability is really a shared agenda across the board. To get teachers engaged, or to deliver any curricular initiative, you need to have teacher engagement. And one of the things that we have done in the past around tackling poverty, for example, is to use our position as the EIS, as the teacher trade union, to co-sponsor a whole range of initiatives, which then give an endorsement to that in a kind of social partnership framework. And I think that's really important, because I could point to other parts of the UK where teacher unions are advocating for tackling climate change, and there's rhetoric at government level, but the two pathways don't seem to merge. And what we're trying to do in Scotland is actually synergise all of the energies, so that we have a kind of single focus on developing an effective strategy, particularly around education, because I think we all recognise the importance of education to taking this campaign forward.
John, I mean, does something have to give in all this, though? I mean, we've seen it already with COVID, of course, huge extra stresses on teachers coping with the shift to online and all the disruptions that have been caused, and now the health-related measures. I mean, is there any similar trade-off around trying to integrate and engage much more on climate change with schools? How do you find the resourcing and the support to allow teachers and unions to involve themselves more in this?
There will always be a congestion within the curriculum, and what I certainly am conscious of is the need to be constantly. You can't take the view that you've removed the congestion from the curriculum, that's it all done. It'll start creeping back in again as soon as you've turned your back. So we have to make clear our priorities. I think one of the central features of the curricular reform that we undertook in Scotland was essentially relied upon the professional judgment of teachers to consider how they could deploy the curriculum effectively to ensure that young people acquire the capacities they need to deal with the world as they find it. Now, any judgment in that respect would say to you, young people must leave our education system with a deep understanding of climate change because of the seriousness for the future of our society. So it's a really central priority, and around that, judgments have to be made about how time is spent and how that prioritisation can be undertaken. There's a lot of debate just now during the election campaign about the investment in the teaching profession, and particularly around professional learning, and it's something to which I'm very committed, and we've got a good track record in supporting that professional learning, but there is more we need to do to assist in that respect. I suppose the final point I would say is that many of the judgments that have to be made in this respect are about trying to win the argument about what really matters in our society and focusing our education system on those essential challenges. And I think if we have an honest and open discussion about that, then we can perhaps come to the correct conclusions. And obviously, as we handle that within the post-COVID environment, it's not quite a post-COVID environment, we're getting to a better place on COVID in Scotland today. We are in a position to focus on how we support the profession to lead education recovery and to build on what's been, I think, by all common acknowledgement, a formidable effort by the teaching profession to make sure that young people were in no way harmed educationally by the issues that have arisen out of COVID.
And Larry, just tell us briefly, what's Education International Scotland planning around COP26? Any particular initiatives?
Well, I think there's a whole range of initiatives taking place from different organisations. I know the EIS, for example, even at a city level in Glasgow, are working with other social partners to try and make sure that post the summit, we have a better public transport system in the city. So there's a lasting legacy. Education International clearly intend to have a presence there and to make sure there's a profile around education. I'm also the European president of the Education International organisation, and I know that ETUS tomorrow and Friday are holding a Education for Sustainability conference. So there's a lot of levels in which we've been involved. I think one of the big issues here, certainly for us in the EIS here in Scotland, is that this is an area where our members can be involved in EIS as a trade union in social partnership with the Scottish Government and other agencies, but also just professionally in the classroom. Because the third partner, I think, here are the young people themselves in our schools. This is a topic that is really important to them. And as any teacher will tell you, engaging your students in something that interests them is the first step in taking them forward. And the pandemic has shown how important schools are to young people's well-being and mental good health. So I think this is an agenda which will engage young people, and we've seen them on the streets taking action before. So this is an open door we're pushing at in terms of getting young people on board, and they're a critical third leg of the tripod in terms of the kind of partnership we want to see working in our schools, so that somewhere down the line we are making progress in terms of tackling climate change and creating a future for our young people.
John, only got a few seconds left, but what are your expectations overall then for the outcomes of COP26?
I think it depends very much on the attitudes that countries bring to COP26. I hope countries come with commitments. I think we're in a much better position to make more progress because of the change of presidency in the United States. And the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, has already had discussions with John Kerry as President Biden's climate envoy. And I think that signals a fantastic change in engagement from the United States. That's an encouraging sign, and we need to make sure that's replicated by everyone. And I certainly can say on behalf of Scotland that we will be providing a very warm welcome to make sure that the summit takes place in the most supportive conditions and circumstances to make sure it makes the most progress on such an important issue.
And you touched on this at the start, but aside from the practicalities of COVID limitations, do you think there's actually a value in trying to do more online to limit the carbon footprint actually of people even attending to Glasgow?
I think there is. Ultimately, some of these events need interaction. I think all of us are finding that we've lived our lives through digital technology for the last 12 months fundamentally, and it's been helpful, and it's got us through a really difficult period, but it's also been tough. And we need human interaction and human dialogue. I'm certainly getting a lot of that during the election campaign, where I'm out and about, now able to speak to voters on their own doorsteps, which is really invigorating. I didn't realise how much I had missed actually being able to talk to people face to face. So I think there's a place, Andrew, for both, for digital technology to try to reduce the carbon footprint and to make as much progress in advance of COP26, but some face-to-face dialogue to make sure that we all sign a bond amongst human beings to do all that we can to tackle climate change.
So John and Larry, thank you both very much indeed for that. It's really important to talk about the engagement with government and the opportunity of COP26 to focus and catalyse on these really essential issues around climate change.